what you would do, like if let's get right into the weeds of this, is you
Sure.
you tear one out and you'd scrunkle it up a bunch. Like you have to just like scrunch it into a ball, unscrunch it, scrunch it into a ball, unscrunch it, and you do
soften it
exactly, and then it would be usable
while you're sitting there.
Yeah.
Give you something to do as well.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Liz Flux.
And I'm Ben McKenzie.
Welcome to Prat Chat, the monthly Terry Pratchett Book Club podcast.
Each month, we discuss one of Terry Pratchett's books with a special guest.
This month, we don't have a guest, so we have a couple of extra books to make up for it. We're reading the Ankh-Morpork Archives, Volume 1 and 2. I don't have a joke, because it's hinging on what Ben says next for me to make a pun.
Oh no, the pressure. But look, since those books collect material from the Discworld diaries, we're also looking at the similar in-universe book, the Discworld Almanac.
And so since we didn't have a guest, we thought we'd try hard. Because there's 3 books. Yeah. It's a thinker.
It is a thinker.
It's not.
That is a thinker. Whoa. Now,
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
That's all right. You know, we haven't really talked about this. Have you ever read any of the Discworld diaries before?
No, not at all.
Look, I've only read one of them before I got these collected books because back in the day when it was new, I bought the very first one. The Unseen University Diary, 1998. Back when I was, what was that? I would have been in my first or second year at university. Oh, God,
Nostalgic.
I can't remember. Yeah. And I dug my copy out because I wanted to compare it to this. And it's interesting because like most of the material is the same. They've updated it just a little bit here and there. But the layout's very different. But also I was like, I'm sure I wrote in this. But I didn't write anything in the diary at all. I filled in the front bit where you put your name and, you know, what house you're in at Unseen University. Well, not what house, but there's something like that. I can't remember. And I made up a Ankh-Morpork address, I think. Yeah.
You know what diary I had in my first year of university?
No, which one?
A Doctor Who diary.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Actually, I had it for the first few years, like, because I used to release a little, like, sort of small one,
Yeah.
and it was you carried it around, it was great, and my favourite one had David Tennant on the front doing his thing, it was great.
Oh, see, I had a Doctor Who diary, but it definitely did not have David Tennant on it. He was not a doctor back then.
Or was he?
Or maybe he was.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
You have to insert the sound effect there, like...
Well, no, come on. We don't have that money. I can't afford Doctor Who sound effects.
Yeah, but like the one that like in BoJack Horseman is like very 90s sounding song, like it has to invoke the TARDIS without actually being the TARDIS.
Oh God. All right, I'll see what I can do.
I think you did it pretty effectively just like through the noise you made then.
Just with my voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
All right. Well, look, we're not here to talk about those diaries. We're here to talk about the 8 diaries that have been collected in the Ankh-Morpork archives, along with the Discworld Almanac, which they kind of released instead of a diary one year. And these collections came out in 2019 and 2020, so they've been around for a little while. I think they're pretty sure they're still in print, and how would you describe? Is this a coffee table book, Liz? Is that what you'd describe these as?
I would describe them as a coffee table book because they're beautifully made. Like they are very nice. But the thing about a coffee table book is usually it's like lots of pictures and a little bit of text. Like not always, like a lot of art books. They're like, and here is 15 essays about this painting. But this one, like it's kind of feast and famine sometimes. Like you have like a couple of like sections where it's just like lots of pictures, a couple of words here and there, and then all of a sudden the 15 essays about the one thing.
Yeah. And look, and that's kind of comes from how they filled out the diaries. So obviously the diaries were also actual diaries. So they had like week to a spread things. And in fact, I don't know if they did this in all of them, but certainly in the Unseen University one, the first one, they had 8 days in each week. So there was an extra day.
I would love that. Like, you could just put in all your notes, or like you can just shunt your like aspirational things there.
Yeah.
Like, oh well, it'd probably make me feel bad actually.
Yeah, it was fun. But because they were meant to be used as a real diary, they have like round world months in them, which is a bit boring. So I think I appreciate them taking all that stuff out of that and putting it into another format. And the Almanac, which we'll get to, which has its own diary thing going on. But they'd have all this sort of stuff at the beginning, which was like, here's an introduction. It's like, oh, you're a new student at Unseen University, for example, in the first one. Great. Here's all the stuff you need to know. Here's a letter from the Arch Chancellor. Here's like a guide to the places. And then you'd have the diary. And then on each page underneath that 8th day, there'd be like a little quote of the week or whatever.
Mm.
And that's where some of the pages that are quite sparse, just a little bit of text in the middle, because they're quite big, these books. They're big square books. Sometimes there are a few pages that just have a little bit of text on them, but usually they collect those bits of text together in a little group, and it's nice.
You know, it's very nice. Like, it's absolutely like something I would not have been able to write anything in, even if it had, like, I had the original diaries. It's the sort of thing, like, I don't want to sully this with my like normal life.
Yeah. I misremembered. I thought the Unseen University one was the one I had when I went to see Douglas Adams live. But I was still at high school then, so that was before the first one came out. And I actually had this other diary. It was called the 1996 Australian Fanish Diary, and it was made by a bunch of sci-fi fans based in Melbourne, actually. Mostly Ian Gunn, sadly dear departed Ian Gunn, who was a star of the Australian sci-fi fan scene, a cartoonist. And Karen Pender, I think was maybe Karen Pender. Look, it's been so long that my memory of this is quite dim, but I think they were maybe married. Maybe they were a couple. I'm not sure. I think so. But anyway, they designed it together, and then they put all quotes from different sci-fi stuff, and they had dates in it for like when conventions were on around the country and all that kind of stuff. It was really cool. But it was just, we just sort of, made quite cheaply. It was like spiral bound, but it had plastic covers and all this nice little bits of art. And I'm sure I've still got it somewhere. But that's the one that I took, and I wrote all my notes from his speeches that he gave when I saw him live. Not in this one. So
Spiral bound is good for a diary because like you use it so much that if you have like a not well made spine that isn't spiral bound, your pages fall out.
Yeah, I found it worked very well. But we should stop talking about diaries that aren't this one.
But I haven't even got to my school diary yet. No.
Oh, no. Yeah. I think I didn't write very much in the dates in the diary. I was never a big diary person. I tried keeping a journal as well, and I never really go into that either.
My diaries are always like a bit like this book, actually. Like you go hard for a little bit, then you're just like, oh, well, no, for a couple of months I don't write anything. And you're like, oh, wait, I have this book that I purchased and it's beautiful. I should start using it again. And then, yeah.
Well, let's talk about this. So Volume 1 of the Ankh-Morpork archives has 4 of these diaries in it. And they're not the first 4. I think they sort of made some interesting choices with which ones they collected together.
Okay.
So the first one has the Unseen University Diary, which is from 1998. Always published the year before, by the way. So this is why the publication dates don't quite match up with the years. But so there's the Unseen University Diary, which was originally from 1998. So that's just after Hogfather. We'll talk more about where they come in the Discworld order. But anyway, so there's that one. There's the Assassin's Guild Yearbook and Diary from the year 2000. The Thieves Guild Yearbook and Diary from 2002. And the Ankh-Morpork Post Office Handbook Diary from 2007. So it's sort of 2 guilds, the university and the post office kind of collected together.
Workplace.
Yeah. But they really are all based in Ankh-Morpork. I'll have more to say about that when we get to the second one. But let's start with we'll just talk about these, I think, a bit at a time because they're sort of, they're meant to feel like an in-world artifact, or the original ones were. These ones, it's more, we've taken the stuff from the diary and presented it in a really beautiful way, including like remastering the illustrations. There are some new illustrations in these. They're mostly in black and white, but there are a few bits here and there in color. And they've done things like they've changed the font, they've changed the layout of the text. It's nice.
It's beautiful.
But this first one is Unseen University, and, it's it's meant to be like, here's a diary for new students kind of deal. And I think because it was the very first one, it suffers a little bit in that there's a fair bit about the university, but then there's a lot of generic, like, here's a guide to Ankh-Morpork kind of stuff, which you wouldn't put in it if you knew you were going to do 5 other ones with different guilds and stuff, I think. But it's pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also always a sucker for a, scare quotes, annotated published book. Like, so this had plenty of that in spades, because it's I know it's one of the meta things that you experience, like, when you're younger and you're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that in a book. And then it's just...
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, look, that's something we see in a lot of the, you know, sort of in-universe books that have been published for the Discworld. Like, there's particularly those little
Nanny
notes.
Og one.
Yeah, all the little pins in there. The Almanac's got a lot of that with the little notes pinned in from the publishers. Oh, yeah, and the whole. But we'll come back. Yeah. We'll get back to that.
Fine.
But there's a lot of pretty interesting stuff in the Unseen University diary. Some of it, I don't know, it's interesting. In the first thing in it is like this sort of introduction by Arch-Chancellor Ridcully. And I thought the thing that I noticed about that is there's a bit where he kind of explicitly acknowledges the privilege of wizards. He says, by being born human, male, and finding the talent to become wizards, you have thrown a treble in the great dice game that is life. Which is, you know, it's an interesting sort of, like, yes, you're very lucky. Like, you know, you didn't earn this necessarily, but also completely just does not acknowledge Esk. Like, this is a time when she was never coming back. We were just pretending that she never existed as far as the Discworld was concerned. Because this is after Hogfather, this was published, and before Jingo, to give you an idea. Yeah, I don't know how I felt about that.
Yeah, I don't know how I felt about the illustration of Ridcully, because it's so at odds with how I imagine him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How so?
Like, as in, I think like that is how he's described, but I always, in my head, he's a wiry sort of guy who like cannot sit down, but like he's like just twitchy, but not in a nervous way, if that makes sense. Okay. So he's a bit more wiry than like he looks like he's a guy who enjoys hunting and going out and enjoying the outdoors, but yeah, it's just not quite readier, I guess, wiry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because he's described as being so much more physical than the other wizards. I can see where you get that idea. But I think I've seen so many of these Paul Kidby illustrations of him that I this is why I love it when people do other illustrations. I mean, look, there's a couple of illustrations of him in here, and there's some that are repurposed, like some of the new ones that went in the diary are repurposed from other places. And then there's some new ones or ones that did appear in the original diary. And there's a great one of Ridcully just holding a crossbow that I think, you know, I think that really captures him. I think that's one of my favorite pictures of him, actually.
The expression as well. He's seen you and he's made a judgment, and
it's a frowny judgment. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But you're the one painting his portrait, so he's got to stay there.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of stuff in here that's quite fun in that there's acknowledgement of the history of the wizards as well. Like, he talks about how they used to, you know, be really competitive and many students would die violently. And you're like, okay, this is pretty rough, which is an ongoing theme with all of the guilds, actually, that it's very dangerous to be a guild member or a student at any of these institutions. Yeah. This is another quote that I really liked from Ridcully's introduction. There is no doubt that we have a lot to learn from you young people, although I personally think I'm already quite well informed on the subjects of being spotty, sulky, and wearing hats on backwards. Yeah. I thought that was it's pretty funny. And that's the thing with these, because they're not a narrative. There's no story. They're just lots of little gags. It's just what would be a funny little thing. It's the Discworld equivalent of a sketch show, really, I think. Yeah.
And it sort of states that you don't have to have a story to be in the world, which is sometimes like a nice change. Like, I've just come off reading the new Hunger Games book, and every time there's a new one, you kind of go, oh, there's just, you just want to, as in you don't want to spend time in that world because it's like the worst place ever. But, you just want to see more of it, and this is a way of doing that in little bite sizes, which is nice.
And I do love that, you know, they've been collected together, so you can still access those without having to buy a diary. Because the diary, the Unseen University one, was quite expensive on the secondhand market for a while, because the diaries, you don't print a massive print run, and of course you never put them back in print because it's no longer that year. So at one point you could get like $200 for a copy. I think it was pretty crazy. I don't know that they're worth that much now that you can get most of the good stuff from them in these books, which is fine by me.
I mean, I know I said I wouldn't write in one and I still wouldn't, but it would be nice if they reissued them as diaries.
They have done some newer diaries, but the newer ones that they've done since Pratchett passed away are all just collections of quotes from the books. They're like, and they've been themed. There was a watch one in, I think, about, I want to say 2018. Maybe it was, I can't remember. I have to look that up. But there was one that they did that was watch themed, but it was just quotes from watch books and possibly some stuff from the old diary. I don't know.
I guess I mean like these ones again, like as in like even just the same, but like just for like 20 years on or something.
Yeah, I guess you could do that. There's nothing stopping you from just relaying out the dates so that it was correct. Yeah. Or doing a universal diary where you write in your own dates.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That would be quite nice, I think. We should be spiral bound. Sorry.
Well, it would make them a lot cheaper, I think, if you spiral bound them. So, look, there's lots of good stuff in here. There's like advice for students because it is aimed directly at students. And again, the later part of it is there's a lot of sort of general Ankh-Morpork advice. And a lot of that is sort of stuff that we've kind of seen before, but with occasional new little jokes, which is fun. But I don't know, there were some bits that I really, really tickled me. And we can't go through everything in here. Like, we don't want to spoil it for you if you want to read it for yourself. But there's some fun little bits. I've got a couple of favorites. Did you have any favorites, Liz?
I like the societies and clubs and also the alumni, like the good wizards, the bad wizards, and sort of like because it was like a sort of whirlwind trip through the books a little bit. And
actually that was one of the bits like where they've got the illustrations of the faculty as well. That's one of the bits they've updated because they added in Dr. Hicks, who hadn't been thought of in 1999, but he's in the later books. So they added him into the faculty and they added like a little entry for him because Stephen Briggs is still around writing stuff. So he could add a few little things based on stuff they'd already written, probably for the Discworld guide, I'd say.
They did the librarian so dirty in his picture.
Oh, really?
Because it looks like they've caught him unawares.
Oh, yeah. I see what you mean. He's like sort of looking like...
Yeah. And I mean, they are quite candid, some of them, like the school picture where you go there and yes, sometimes they get you on a bad angle, you're looking slightly away, but that one looks like they just sort of like walked in on him in the library and gone, snap, bye.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Dr. Hicks, though, absolutely nailed it. Like that's, he does look like he's the one who like slips his theatre troops information into your pocket, right? Yeah, he looks like.
Yeah.
And he's just so pleasant looking, as he shouldn't be.
For some reason, I imagined him as younger. As sort of on the younger side for a senior wizard, but I guess not.
No, I agree with you. I pictured him younger, but I feel like for lack of a better word, vibe is exactly right.
Yeah,
like the personality
totally.
Is there. Aesthetically, not what I pictured, but I feel like personality, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that as well.
And what are your favorite bits?
I had a couple. I really love, there's a bit early on where they're sort of talking about using the library, and there's a bit where they say that you should not go and look up your own thesis via L-Space. And I'm like, that's good advice, don't get yourself into a time loop and cheat by going and looking up your thesis so you don't have to write it.
But the problem with that is like the ones who hadn't thought of it and who would do it now find out that that's an option and will go do it.
Well, they try to persuade you not to because they tell you that no matter how long it takes you, like just sitting down and writing it is a much better option. But look, now, I work in tertiary education and a lot more of this resonates with me than when I first read it when I was a student. There's a lot of the stuff about lectures and not attending. There's a great bit where it's like, if you're not attending a lecture, that's different to just not being at the lecture. Like you have to know that the lecture is on and you're deliberately not there, and then that's fine. But then there's a whole bit also about how they've more or less abolished terms, except they've made them 1 week long, but then they don't really pay attention. But the whole point is that the faculty don't want to be in a room with students any more than they have to. And I'm just like, it's totally non-functional as a university, really. They're very wise, Pratchett and Stephen Briggs, to not try and make it work, to just sort of have this like nonsense, I think. It's much more fun.
All right. Bit of an unfair one, but if you were a student here, and we're looking at page 24 here.
Okay.
If you were a student, you've just joined the university and they say clubs are obligatory. You've got to join one of these clubs.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Which one's it going to be?
Look, I don't know. I feel it's kind of sad that there's not really, like, they add in a reference to Dr. Hicks's amateur theatre company, but I feel like there should be a student theatre. And there isn't.
You can join that in your second year. In fact, you can start that in your
I'll
second
start
year.
one in my
your
second
first year. You have to join one of the existing ones.
It's difficult. Well, there's not that many. I think I do. Look, it would have to be. Come on, it's got to be the Friendly Flamethrowers League. Partly because it's difficult to say, but also because swamp dragons. Although it's interesting because that kind of clashes with in another part in the book. They're like, you cannot have dragons on premises. But come on, got to join the Dragon Club. What about you, Liz?
Well, in reality, I'd probably join the Dragon Club along with you, but I would absolutely have to head along just to witness a little bit of the Morpork Folk Dance and Song Club, because it just sounds like a time, and I need to ask someone, like, what happened to lead to the bannings, and how was there, like, a splitting of the groups? So the quote is, there's a new club rule banning all songs beginning, "As I was a-walking," or "Come all ye bold seafaring lads." So, yeah.
Because they know those are the dirty ones.
And before you buy a half pint of beer, you have to sing a song about how good the old one was.
That's one of those subtle Tolkien references, I think. Because, there's that scene where, I think it's in the book as well. It's been too long since I read the book. But
they come in pints?
They're in the Green Dragon and they're drinking the pints, and then they start singing about it, That's great.
Yeah, I've never gotten a pint and not thought of that quote.
No, absolutely. You can't. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Again, there's a lot of sort of general information about Ankh-Morpork. There's some stuff in there that we don't see elsewhere. I think my favorite bit of something that comes in from broader Ankh-Morpork in this particular one of the diaries is the campaign for Real Mayhem. Another riff on a joke. Like, there's the campaign for Real Cats in The Unadulterated Cat, which is a take on the campaign for Real Ale. But in this one, there's a gag about the campaign for Real Mayhem, who are complaining that the bar brawls in the Mended Drum are no longer real. They're just being staged for tourists. And I thought that was very funny. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And there's lots of fun little illustrations. Because I have this one, the original, I was able to sort of look at a few of the illustrations and see that quite a few of them have been updated or replaced with a newer one. Like the one of Nobby dancing for the Folk Dance and Song Club. That's a new one. It's different to the original one. There's a really great illustration of like a young dwarf eating a rat on the stick.
Yes.
It's not in the original diary.
So visceral.
It's great. I love that. Yeah.
The anticipation. The chainmail mittens, like, that are chained to that are attached by little chains to the sleeves. It's a good time.
Yeah. Very, very cute. Glubs, as the child in Hogfather would say. Yeah. So that is fun. I think the other illustration, there's some great, like the art's great. Like Kidby's art is always great. But I think the other one that struck me was the Tower of Art. So this is the really tall tower at the university. And here it's not like in the old Josh Kirby illustrations, it was just a really tall but sort of really twisty and sort of slightly falling apart tower. But here there's this big spire of rock, and then the tower is sort of built on the top of it, which I don't know if it completely matches the descriptions in the books, like particularly the earlier books, but it just kind of works and it looks really cool, but it's not quite how I imagined the Tower of Art to look.
It looks like a raised hand.
Oh yeah, well that's fitting, like doing a magic gesture maybe. Yeah.
As in, like, it looks like it's a student asking a question. So I'm not sure if I can, in our audio podcast, I'm going to try and like replicate it, but like it looks kind of like.
That's very good. That's very good visual for our audio only podcast.
Just imagine someone raising their hand and then holding up the book with the picture of the thing that they're trying to show looks like a raised hand, and that probably get you something of a mental image.
It's great.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about the university one before we move on?
I just want to say how much I enjoyed the illustration of Ponder, because that also captures his energy very well.
Yeah, I agree. Paul Kidby's Ponder, I think, is one of my favourite of his characters.
Yeah.
He just always looks so put upon.
He's running through his to-do list in his mind and it's not ending. Like, you can see it.
He's going to be there forever.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Well, look, that's the first one. And then there's 3 more in this book. The second one is the Assassin's Guild. You have to do the Assassin's Guild. We always wanted to know more. I mean, we've talked about this so many times on the podcast where we're like, oh, we got that glimpse in Pyramids. And we're like, couldn't we have a whole thing, like particularly the more modern Assassin's Guild? And this is kind of the closest thing that we ever get. And this came out in 2000, so it's between Carpe Jugulum and sort of just before the Fifth Elephant. Often the diaries, they would come out late the year before the year they were for, but also the Discworld book was usually published in November, so they were coming out quite around the same time. So this is just before the Fifth Elephant. Each one is like sort of a savage parody as well of something. Like the first one obviously is old school universities and faculty and student relations, but then this one, just a savage satire
Fancy
of
boys.
private schools or public schools as they're called in the. I recently learned why they're called public schools, which it always seemed weird because when we say public school in Australia, we mean a state-run school that anybody goes to, and a private school is one you pay for. Whereas there are private schools in the UK, or there were. I don't know if there still are, but they were schools that only certain people were allowed to go to. Whereas a public school is still one you have to pay to go to, but anyone who can pay can go.
That makes sense.
So, I mean, they might still have other entrance requirements, but the idea is that it's publicly accessible to people with the means, as opposed to it's only for people of a certain class or a certain profession or whatever. Anyway, but that doesn't really apply to the Assassin's Guild. Well, it kind of does because there's a lot of history in here, and they talk about the history of the school and how it was originally quite exclusive, and then they opened it up a bit more. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun stuff in the Assassin's Guild one, but it also, as someone who briefly went to a private school and does not care to remember that particular experience, if at all possible, there was some stuff in there I was like, oh no, this feels too real.
Traditions, bullying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Did you have any favorite bits in this?
I did like the traditions because they were just, again, savage. The school rules because, like, there was a narrative that ran through them. Like, they did do a standalone rules, but there was also, like, a bit of a story that went through and then, like, clarifications as you went because it tells the story, like, why you're having these rules as well because, like, sometimes they're so specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, no boy is to keep a crocodile in his room. Rule 18A, no boy is to keep an alligator or any large amphibious reptile in his room. 18B, no boy, we wish to make it clear, is to keep any kind of monitor, goanna, or giant chameleon in their room. 18C, nor in the cellar. 18D, nor in a cage on the roof. And it just keeps going like that.
Yeah, we're wiping out all the loopholes. Yeah.
But like this one boy in 200 years ago probably just kept pushing the limits of what lizards, what scary large creatures he could put in his room. So it's just very good.
Yeah. I also enjoyed that at the start of that, because they talk about in the address that they've just finally made the school properly co-ed. I think they talk about how it was a bit of an experiment the previous semester or something, and now it's going to be ongoing. And so at the start of the rules, it says, where necessary, boy may be read as girl and girl may be read as boy. Yes. And then there's some notes right at the end about how don't use that to get around some of these rules. That was very funny as well.
Oh, poison rings are to be placed in the receptacle provided before any pupil does domestic sciences. Because it's just the most school thing ever. That would, yeah.
So good. I think one of my favorite things that's in most of these guild-based books are the little illustrations. They don't really have one that's quite the same for the faculty of Unseen University because we already know what they look like and there's lots of pictures of them anyway. But there's these group drawings of the faculty. Yes. And the one for the Assassin's Guild is so great because there's all these characters who you've never seen before and you never see again. Possibly, I think most of them never even get mentioned in any of the books, although there's a couple who get mentioned here and there. But I love that. I just think they all looked great.
Did you have a favourite?
Oh, look, they're all pretty great. Miss Alice Band, is kind of a favourite. She's a member of the faculty. And she's clearly been off on some very Lara Croft style adventures, like stealing stuff from tombs and killing tomb guards and stuff. And you're like, this is great. I love this. So she's very cool. But I like them all. I really like the way Paul Kibbe draws Lord Downey, who is like this sort of very kindly old man who offers you a peppermint, but you should not take one. And there's a repeated motif of that in the book, that this is a test for students. Like, don't take the things that he offers you. When you go, if you get called up for tea and cakes, don't eat the cakes. That's a test.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I also really like, what's his name? There's this guy, Mr. Moody, I think it is, who's the personal grooming teacher, and he's got this amazing quiff.
Yeah. No.
Just great stuff.
Do you think Professor Stone's number 15, the guy in the front with the dragons, he uses his dragons for metalwork? Because he's alchemy and metalwork. So do you reckon he's...
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, at the very least, they're eating like his leftover slag and bits of coal that he doesn't need. Yeah.
It's very symbiotic.
Yeah. Do you have any other favorites?
No, I mean, I could just talk through each of them one by one, but it is good. The effort that went into this, very good.
Yeah. There's just so much fun stuff in here and just so many good little gags and a lot of references. So one of the things we haven't mentioned is that each section, so it's one book that's got content from 4 different diaries, but each one starts with a little section that's like a little introduction. It's got a quote from one of the books that sort of sets the tone for that diary or that guild. But then there's also a little authors and illustrators note from Stephen Briggs and Paul Kidby. And the one for the Assassin's Guild just talks about how much fun he had looking up all of the weird old traditions of places like Eton. And I think he even says that he contacted them and they allowed him time in their library to access and research their records of traditions and ceremonies, which given how savagely they're sending them up, I thought it's very sporting of them. But there's lots of little bits of new stuff in here that never comes up in the books. Like they've allowed a troll into the Assassin's Guild school for the first time because I think he's Mr. Chrysoprase's son. He's some troll person's son or nephew, and so he's getting special treatment. There's just lots of great little stuff in there like that. Yeah.
So I'm obsessed with the rules, but it's like if you can't produce a pistol or something within this period of time, then you're in trouble.
Any other favourite gags from this bit?
The weapons. That was a good one.
Oh, yeah.
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 Mackerel.
Oh, mackerel. Yeah, it's just a picture of a mackerel.
Yeah, just in case. I mean, it does look pretty dangerous, but it's like that classic story where someone's killed with a ham and then you cook the ham and the evidence is gone.
Yes. Very clever. This is like a section of famous instruments of dispatch. So it's like what famous things have people been killed with. Yeah, it's pretty great. And similarly, there's a whole section on people who've been commissioned to be killed by the guild, including a section on open commissions, which has a picture of Veterinary and one of Rincewind, which is a bit rough, although the commentary under that is quite fun, and quite a few other characters. So again, there's a little bit of, we want to include characters that as well as all this new stuff. And so they're finding ways to do that, which is quite fun.
And amplifying the mystery of the Duck Man.
That's true. Yeah. Why did anyone want to kill the Duck Man? What's that all about?
And quite badly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of a worry, to be honest.
Is it the duck?
Oh my God. That had not occurred to me. We're going to come back to ducks in a bit too. I do have one favourite gag that I do kind of want to mention, which is just the last words of the fencing teacher, which were, "Very good, boy. A marked improvement since last year." Just such a good gag. Oh, I love that quite a lot.
Was I getting mixed up with my alumni in this one? Because they've got the disgraced old boys and the old boys in this one. So I'm like, oh, is that what the thing I was thinking of for Unseen University?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, I thought you were talking about more the faculty, but yeah, maybe you were thinking of this one.
I think I got them muddled, yeah.
Just such a great excuse for Paul Kidby to draw all kinds of people. I love that. They've even got Zlorf Flannelfoot in here. An assassin character from The Colour of Magic who's not like any of the other assassins. Like, he's really rough, not at all cultured. There's also a bit of retconning that goes on in these books. It's like, oh, we're going to include all this stuff, but this is an excuse for us to figure out why this thing doesn't quite fit with the other things. That's a lot of fun too. That's probably not about the Assassin's Guild. There's so much good stuff in there. But the next one is the Thieves Guild. And this is like the Thieves Guild doesn't really feature very heavily as a guild really in the books. Like they're there at the guild meetings and we occasionally run into a Thieves Guild member mugging somebody on the street and there's a gag about them leaving a receipt or whatever. But this is really the only place where we delve deeply into how does this weird organization work. And there's a lot of old school kind of cops and robbers style.
And
like
the illustrations reflect that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, like to the point where a lot of them are wearing like stripy jumpers and carrying a bag with swag written on it. Like it's very traditional old school stuff. It's a lot of fun. But I think you can't take something like this too seriously, because once you start to take it seriously, you start to see the kind of horror inherent in, a government sanctioned protection racket, which is basically what the Thieves Guild is. But, they also don't shy away from the fact that, well, it's technically a criminal enterprise. It's quite rough, but they do soften it a bit by making it a bit. It reminds me of like British TV shows, like the kind of criminals you'd see in something like The Bill or The Swing. They're not horrible psychopathic murderers. They're like rough guys who run a business, but the business happens to be criminal.
The worst criminals in The Bill would always turn out to be corrupt cops.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. There's a special place for them. But there's another address from like the president, but this one he can't write, so he's dictating it to someone, and it's got these little gags about that where he's saying, don't put that in, like that kind of thing.
I did love how this one felt like a living document. It kind of felt like, or perhaps like almost like the newsletter that goes out quarterly to update you on all of the things that's happening on. I mean, if you were a member of the Thieves Guild, I feel like reading this would make you quite motivated, because your guild is like expanding. There's different career opportunities. You can learn some stuff. So yeah, it has a different feeling to the others in that way.
Yeah, and it makes sense because they sort of pitch it as a yearbook, not just a diary. So the idea is you get one of these every year, and it's not like they have email. Like they're not mailing their alumni or members every month with like, hey, here's the latest trends. It's like, no, we'll just print a yearbook every year and you can read that.
Just get William DeWard to knock them up with a newsletter every so often. Back in the day. So did you have any favourite bits, Ben?
For this one, I think it was less... There were some good gags in it, but for me, there was like a lot of the little references and a lot of the additional information that you wouldn't necessarily, like, he was never really going to make it into a book. But like, one of the ones I found really interesting was that there's like a sub guild within the Thieves Guild, which is for doing time, like going to jail.
It's like the mob, right?
Yeah, it was great and really weird. But I also really enjoyed like all of the specific guild professions. There's a whole section of these. There's like pages and pages of them, including I think there's the breaker and decorator, which is great. And the illustration of one of the senior guild members who sort of represents that faction, whose name in the book is Lawrence Leakey. Oh, now, and I used to know how to pronounce Welsh, but I can't remember how to do it anymore. And it's, I'm going to butcher it. So I'm not going to try. But anyway, he's got a Welsh name, which is a reference to a real life person, Lawrence Llewellyn Bowen, who was the host of Changing Rooms in the UK. So that's kind of what that whole profession is a reference to, this idea that people are going to sneak into your house and redecorate it in a way that you don't like.
Like Backyard Blitz.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like that. I think my other favorite specific profession was the lack of confidence trickster. Just a good gag, you know. I really like that. How about you? Did you have any favorite bits?
Yeah, so I enjoyed that there is a guild of victims.
Oh, yes.
But it's just one guy. And I also...
Yeah.
The New Crimes Corner was the kind of thing that made me think about like how it's like, oh yeah, we'd like to update you. It was like, it had real Christmas letter energy. It's like, you know, Auntie Mabel's gone off to I don't even know, like to Wagga to look at, I don't know. I don't get Christmas letters anymore, but,
yeah.
An Alibi Corner, which was quite good. It's like, there's like, here's the tested ones that you can use, and this is replacing that one. And I quite enjoyed, I didn't do it because I was dining with 3 bishops at the time. Brackets, new, used with care.
But there's so many good little bits. Speaking of those new kinds of crime, or the slang for the different kinds of crime, there's one called a skylarker, which is just an excuse to have this whole gag about this complicated practice of breaking a roof so that you can come and like pretend to be someone who's going to fix the roof as a preface to casing the joint and stealing things, and how nowadays they're more likely to break the roof and then just charge you a shitload of money to fix it and make money that way. And I was like, okay.
That cuts too close to home.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I did enjoy that all the Guild Tutor images are like mugshots, like side-on mugshots.
Yeah.
Because
that was fun.
It lends them gravitas. It's like, oh, they've been at their profession and they've actually experienced what they're teaching, like all the way through the consequences of it, in theory.
Yeah. There's one or two bits in these And maybe it's because, they were a diary and they were meant to be a bit disposable, like people weren't going to reread these things and really kind of critique them. There's a couple of little bits where I'm like, that's weird. Why would you make that joke? And there is one in the Thieves Guild one, which is when they're talking about the guy who carved all of the doors, because they also reveal that the Thieves Guild building used to be the main courthouse, but they don't really have a courthouse anymore in Ankh-Morpork, which is why whenever there's any kind of legal stuff going on at a high level, it just happens in the palace in front of the patrician. But anyway, some guy carved these doors, which were amazing. And then there's this weird kind of joke about how he was so depressed that he killed himself. And I was like, that just doesn't, it's not really, no. I don't know. It felt a bit off. It didn't feel quite right to me.
Please enjoy your diary and have a terrible day.
Yeah. I mean, they can't all be winners, right? They can't all be winners. And there's a very high hit ratio of very silly gags and fun stuff. But so every now and then there is something that's a bit of a clunker. That was one for me. So that's the Thieves Guild. But then this book ends with the post office manual, which was a lot of fun. It wasn't that long ago that we read Making Money. So I feel like Moist von Litvig is in our hearts and minds.
Always.
But he's barely in the post office manual, which is, I don't know. How did you feel about that? Like, there's a picture of him and there's a couple of notes from him, but he clearly hasn't written any of it.
It's not on brand for him, I don't think, because if there's going to be like an official, here's how you post office document, I feel like he'd be all over it. Yeah.
There's little hints. I don't think they explicitly say, but because of his notes, I think it's implied that most of it has been written by Tolliver Grote, including there's one bit where there's multiple exclamation marks, and I'm like, okay, this tracks. Yeah, I think Grote would be a multiple exclamation mark user in his written communication, at least. But I was a bit disappointed because they're not really. He's writing it, but he doesn't really talk about himself. And there's illustrations of him and Stanley, and there's a couple of Moist, but mostly it's just about the post office, and it's an excuse for, again, a lot of gags about post office traditions and a lot of traditional postal gags as well. Like, there's one towards the end. There's the traditional old, we look for ones marked handle with care so we know which ones to hit with a hammer, that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's also some fun history and things. Did you have any favourite bits in this one?
I'm getting my bits muddled up, but is this the one where they go into the details about the Saucy stamp where, they've capped?
Oh, yeah.
So I did enjoy that. Moist note there. I feel like that was sort of good, but again, it sort of jars from the world. Good continuity on the page before where the Tower of Art picture is the one from earlier in the book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the one that's on the stamp. How about you?
Oh, look, one of my favourite gags in this whole book, possibly all of them actually, comes towards the start of the post office manual. So there's a bit in the history of the Ankh-Morpork Post. This is, in fact, it's the first stuff written in the book. In days of yore, about 225 years before olden days, but about 200 years later than ancient times. And that sort of specific definition of what counts as those sort of generic, it was a long time ago phrases. That really tickled me for some reason. But there's lots of little things. There's lots of little references in this one to the history of the post office and even the recent history, like the things that happen in Going Postal. Which makes sense because it was published only a couple of years after Going Postal in 2006. So in between Thud and Wintersmith. And we get pictures of some of the things from the book that we otherwise wouldn't get pictures of, like the sorting machine and all that kind of nonsense. So, yeah, I don't know. I liked that a lot.
And the proper outfit that Moist is modelling it on, but he's not. His is a lot more modest.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The outfit of FedEx, the messenger of the gods.
But do you reckon he has one that, that a doorbell requested? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe he does. He keeps it in I was going to say he keeps it in the cupboard, but you couldn't really hang it up, could you?
He's probably just always wearing it with just the suits over the top.
We just don't know.
Yeah, it's part of the... True. And the illustration of Tiddles is great because I literally yesterday was explaining about how... Because my cat Asimov has gotten very into routine. So to the point where if I sleep in, he usually likes to sleep on my side of the bed during the day. So he'll just come and sleep on top of me, but not in a Not in a cuddly, we're having a nice time way. He's just like, this is where I sleep and you happen to be here, so I'll just sleep there too.
You're in my way.
Yeah, so I explained the story of Tiddles and the chair, and yeah.
Yeah, it's a great picture of Tiddles.
Yeah.
Very, very good. I did like, there was one bit where they were talking about, because there's a lot of rules in this. There's a lot of, because it's not really a manual. I described it as a manual. I think they describe it as a, what do they call it? A handbook and diary. So it's meant for post office staff, but it does mean it has a lot of the rules and regulations of the post office in it. And there's just lots of little fun bits of that. So there's a lot of stuff about what you are and aren't allowed to post. There's a great bit where they reveal that there's no restrictions on the weight of letters. There's only the restrictions on dimensions, and the dimensions are ludicrously big. Like it's ridiculous. You can send an enormous letter, but then you're not allowed to send the answer to an acrostic, which I assume is, they mean crossword. I'm not really sure why you'd send the answer to an acrostic, and guessing competitions. And you're also not allowed to play thud by mail. And I wonder if this is somehow patrician related. I'm not really sure. Or whether it's like protecting the niche of the clacks. Not really sure about that either. But there's a great one about, this is probably my favorite one specifically for the post office, where they're talking about the SWALK, sealed with a loving kiss, things that you can write on, and which ones are acceptable. But they also say that, be careful if you're putting cents on letters, because it might be fine for your love letter, but remember, your letter will go in a sack with a whole bunch of other letters, and the effect of, Mr. Jones's business letter to Mr. Smith when it's covered in eau d'amour could be quite unexpected. And I was like, oh, that feels like the start of a cute, romantic comedy. Yeah, I was into that. I thought that was very nice.
I mean, make it happen. You can write it.
Oh, that's true. That could be fun. Again, one of the illustrations that I thought was interesting, I mean, I love the sorting machine, but there's illustrations of the Clacks Towers, and they're quite a different design to the one that we saw in the Clacks board game, which I think are meant to be more modern Clacks Towers. These ones have sort of just wooden shutters that don't seem to have lights behind them, and the shutters are sort of erected high above the little control room that the operators sit in, whereas the one illustrated in the Clacks board game, the shutters are sort of on the outside of the control room, and they've got these big circular bits with lights behind them. So I'm not quite sure how that matches up to the description in the book. I'd have to go back and have another look, but it's an interesting alternate take where I'm now not quite sure what the Discworld Clacks Towers are supposed to look like, but that's all right.
Have to go back to the original source.
Yeah. There's not heaps of stamps in this.
No.
I would have thought there'd be loads more, but I guess they hadn't made lots of Discworld stamps at this stage. They'd started making them, but they hadn't made loads of them.
Yeah, because if the statement about the cabbage one is out, then I feel like it's early-ish.
Yeah, it feels like it's soon after they've kind of come back from the brink.
And it's Tolliver writing this, not Stanley. So.
Yeah, that's true. He's not as interested in the stamps.
Yeah.
But again, there's that sort of running story through the notes about post boxes, about what you can and can't put in them, including animals, to keep other animals from eating the letters. That was pretty funny.
Maybe the Assassin's Guild child kept putting their crocodile in. I don't know. Well, maybe that's a solution ultimately.
Yeah. It reminded me of one of my favorite gags, actually, which is a pun, which is unusual for me to have that as a favorite. It's not a Pratchett joke. It's an old Jamoan joke. I think he did it on his TV show. So Jamoan's an Irish comedian who's very famous in Australia. He used to have a TV show here, and he had one about, he went to his letterbox and there were some snails and they'd eaten his letters, and he just said to them, "No, stupid. Lettuce." Well, that was very funny. And I always remember that if snails ever eat my letters, which they did when I was away for a while last year. So I enjoyed that. But I had
enjoyed snails
stamps,
eating your letters?
Well, I didn't enjoy that. No, that's incorrect. Yeah. But I did enjoy these stamps in this because, Liz, they've got rat stamps. I love that so much, the tiny little stamps that the rats use in Bad Blitz. I thought that was really fun.
They've got their own death. They've got stamps.
I know. It feels like they use them as kind of a currency, but I don't know. I just really like that as a little kind of connection between different things. It was great.
Yeah. No, that's cute. And they're proportionately illustrated.
Yeah, they're very small.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've printed those, like real ones you can buy, like the same way they printed a lot of the other stamps. I don't know if they've done the rat stamps. They'd probably be too small. It'd be quite hard.
Well, if anyone knows, please send us a message.
Yeah. We can probably find out.
I want to be told by someone who owns some and who can send us a photograph.
That would be pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I really like, the other illustration is just the golems.
Oh, yeah.
Great golem pictures.
They look a little bit sad, though, is my thing. Like, they look a little bit sad.
They do.
Like, they don't look neutral. They look a little bit sad.
Yeah.
I don't think they are in the book, but just the illustration.
No. So that's volume 1 of the Ankh-Morpork archives. They're books that you don't need to read cover to cover. Like, that's really not what they're for. They're really for delving into a little bit, finding some fun stuff, and just, poking into different corners of the disc in a new way. And look, we'll come to volume 2, but I thought maybe we should break them up by having a look at the Discworld Almanac in the middle, because this is a fun book. You actually bought me my copy of this. You found it at a secondhand bookshop in New Zealand, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, and I went back there recently, but yeah, it's great.
Oh yeah, you did too. That's right. I remember you telling me. What a nice book. I should plug them. It's Pegasus Books in, where are they?
Wellington.
Wellington. There you go. Great city. Love Wellington. If you're from Wellington, hello. Thanks for listening. What a nice city you live in. I love it. I hope to come visit again soon. But this is not a diary for us on Round World. This is the Almanac, which is referred to repeatedly in many, like not constantly, but in quite a lot of the Discworld books. People are always talking about how they love the Almanac, and there's a constant joke about how the main reason they love it is because paper's hard to come by in the country. So, in this edition of the Almanac, they've acknowledged that by putting a little dot in the corner, like you were saying earlier, Liz, to make a hole for the nail. Yeah.
I was going to say there's a lot of great puns in this, and the illustrations sort of take it to an extra level sometimes. Terry Pratchett famously doesn't do many puns, but yeah.
No, but there are a lot in this. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And interesting. So unlike all of the diaries, which were co-written with Stephen Briggs, this is co-written with Bernard Pearson, the cunning artificer who was one of the first people to do Discworld merch through his business Clarecraft, which later became the Discworld Emporium. And still exists as an online store. So this is where this comes from. And there's some mentions of Wincanton in this, which is where the Discworld Emporium shop was. I mean, it's still there, but it's not open to the public anymore. And Wincanton was twinned with Ankh-Morpork in the ceremony. In fact, we've read we discussed the speech that was given. Yeah. And so there's some little references to it in here, which don't quite acknowledge that Wincanton is maybe in another universe. But maybe they kind of do. But yeah, I thought that was cute.
The months sort of like really broke my brain a bit, because I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so this is like kind of real, but kind of not real, and then it's all not real, and I spent all this time going through and counting up the octadays to see if they made sense. And I was like, no, you should read the words rather than checking if the fake calendar is aligning with it.
Yeah, well, they talk about how this is for the common year. There's a whole section at the start. And if you want to know how the years work on the Discworld, all you need to do is read the one and only footnote in the very first Discworld novel, which goes into a lot of detail. But basically, the disc revolves. It goes around full 360 degrees, and that's called a full disc year, and that takes 800 days. Nice round number. The way the seasons work is that you have summer when you're perpendicular to, like, Great Atuan's head, because the sun goes around his or her shell, right? Not in the direction of travel, so around the sides of the shell. And so the sun is closest to the disc at the edge, on the side of his shell or her shell, and it's furthest away from the disc when you're near the head or the tail of Great Atuan. So you kind of, effectively what that means is, as the thing, you don't have to understand this, but just to explain it, in the full 800 days, there's 2 sets of 4 seasons. So a common year is just one set of seasons, and that's generally how they explain it. So a common year is 400 days long. It's not 400 years
400
long.
years.
It's 400 days long.
Sometimes it feels like that, though.
Well, it does, yeah. And it's made up of these 8-day weeks, and you have a whole bunch of months that kind of correspond to our months. And then you also have Ik, which is subtitled in this almanac, The Month No Year Will Own. Oh, it's so good. But then after that sort of little introduction about the common year and a little bit about how that all works, there's a whole section which is the calendar. And it's largely an astrological calendar. It's really talking about predictions for what's going to happen and all that kind of stuff. But then also, because this almanac is meant to go out to people in the country, there's all these like little bits of advice about what kind of stuff you should be doing, animal husbandry, when you should be planting and rotating your crops, all that kind of stuff.
How to sow your wild oats, like literally.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of innuendo in this book as well. There's not a lot of references to Forex in this book, but in the month of Ik, there is a brief mention that says, in the red land of Forex, there will be drought and a rain of small items, but nullus anxietus. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. No worries, mate. But yeah, so each month is accompanied by a list of the dates and the days of the week, which is kind of ridiculous because they always match up because there's exactly, they evenly divide the weeks. Just like any good fantasy calendar. They're like, let's not make it confusing like a real one. But it does also say, when the full moon will be, when the crescent moon will be. And and then there's lots of these little silly predictions, some of which are a lot of fun. Were there any that stood out to you, Liz?
So not the predictions, but like the thing that I come back to and think about, I don't know why, like, it feels like moles have been coming up in conversation more than normal this year, as moles, the creature that live under the ground. Cause,
Yeah,
there's a song that was talking about, there's a lyric in it that's like safe as a mole, and I was like, are moles safe? They're constantly getting like dug up and things, and the answer to that is no, they get hunted by badgers, or in this book they are like, a mole shouter will come for them, and it's just like this man who comes like wearing a necklace of mole skulls and yells through a horn.
Oh my God. Yeah. There's a lot of those very silly, like, this is not how it works in the real world, but what if there were all these traditional jobs that don't exist anymore that don't really make sense? Like, because there's the mole shouter. There's also the worm herder, which I thought was great. Or worm piper, sorry, who will cause the worms to come and visit your farm and then move them on. A lot of that stuff, just great. Just great fun.
Ringing your hogs, but it's like playing them like instruments, and it has that great illustration of like a group of guys just like sort of treating them like a xylophone, but gently.
Yeah, lots of fun.
But no, you were talking about predictions. So did you have a favorite prediction?
Well, I was, and look, there's a lot of them. So in February, there's a two-headed beast shall be born in Lanka, but will excite no interest, for this happens quite a lot around Slice. That's great. Oh, yeah. It will be a time of small hammers, but will seem otherwise. Like, just this sort of, like, wisdom-sounding nonsense that could mean anything. It's just, I feel like they just really nailed the tone. It's just so much fun.
Nailed it with a small hammer?
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
This is from April, a man associated with gloves shall make a strange discovery. But then there's also a reference to the events of a certain book where it says, in Borogravia there will be talk of war, but women shall have the last word. I'm like, I think I've read that book. So yeah, there's lots of stuff like that in there.
Do you think a man with 3 names shall achieve a strange reputation is Moist von Lipwig, or is that...
Oh, you know what? That could be. That could be. He's got at least 3 names.
Yeah, but in different ways as well.
Oh yeah, that's true. Oh, okay. Yep. I like that. There's lots of little fun stuff like that. And then in between, there's things like, there's a whole section about cabbages on the Stowe Plains.
I'm on that page, just coincidentally.
Yeah. Where there's a painting, a famous painting of a cabbage. There's cabbage poetry. There's do
you mind if I
so much fun nonsense.
Say the name of the painting?
Oh, please do.
Still life with cabbage, broccoli, both green and purple, sprouts, kale, and elderly couple being attacked by werewolf by Josiah Remnant.
Yes, Josiah Remnant, who's a very fun character. There's a couple of fun characters who are invented for this book. So there's the cabbage poet Makepeace Thomas Bounder, and there's the cabbage artist Josiah Cabbage Remnant, which is great. And it also reminded me of the artist from Unseen Academicals. Remember the one who paints Juliet when she stands up from the cabbage cart or peas cart, I think it is.
Yes.
And it just had very similar vibes. I liked that a lot.
It was kind of the opposite though, like as in similar vibes, but in the opposite directions, because it's like it's his masterpiece, this like beautiful maiden standing up amongst all this stuff, and then the other one who's like focused on the brassicas, but everything that's happening gets in there.
Yeah. That was great. That was really great. It's got all the stuff that you expect in this sort of old book of wisdom. It's got old proverbs. It's got advice. I just found the mole dancing guy.
The picture is so good.
So good. A newt called Nigel shall emerge from a river in far-off Nothingfjord, and shall argue with all within hearing in blank verse, and it will get mighty cross and stroppy until at last it bursts into flame out of sheer indignation, and the people will wonder. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not even it's just, crazy business. I love it.
What about the tear out page of mushrooms that you can take with you when you go hunting for mushrooms, and it tells you what they're called and whether they're edible, and all the pictures are the exact same mushroom.
They look identical. Yeah, it's great. And this book also has, I'm not sure where it appears in the books, but it has the quote, all fungi are edible. Some fungi are not edible more than once.
Yeah. It's accurate.
It is accurate.
I feel like it is in one of the books. Like, I feel like...
I think it might be. I think there's a version of it. Yeah, I think you're right. There's a great bit where, this is the one we talked about this earlier, where it's got the notes from the publishers. And they talk about this old man, whose name is Wilf, who gives them all of the predictions. And then they talk about how one of the people who works at the paper thinks he might actually be the god of celestial orbs and geometry. And there's a picture of him on the front cover, and he's got 1 foot on a crocodile and 1 foot on a lion, and then all these things floating around his head. It's just, it's great.
Beautiful.
It's very silly. Yeah. I said we come back to ducks, because there's a section about the moon, and then there's just a short section about the duck and magic, and this is accompanied by some notes from the publishers, sort of explaining why this has happened, and it's kind of all a mistake. Ducks are not supposed to be magical, but they're look, let's not change it now, because we've been putting this bit about ducks and magic in for a long time. And then it's got a few other things. It's got some information about markets in the country and also in Ankh-Morpork. It's got some more stuff from the Cabbage Growers Association. Of course it does. And it's got some ads in the old school style, which are quite fun. And a few of those ads are real. They're for real businesses that existed at the time it was published. Not all of them still do. Places where you could buy Discworld merchandise. But then you've also got Learn the Higher Magics with Lettuce Earwig. And
Arwaj. Sorry. I think you mean.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Arwaj. I do apologize. So, yeah, there's some great stuff in there. But also, there's the PJSM prints, which is what became Discworld.com. So that's where you could get the Discworld artwork of Paul Kidby. And so, there's all kinds of stuff in there. And there's a perpetual diary in here, which has 36 days in each month, of course. And there's no 8s in the calendar. It says 7+1 instead. You can write in what day of the week it is, because that might change. I don't know how that would change over the year, given the way the Discworld calendar works, but
I think I've just emotionally given up on understanding calendars. So, and I've definitely said this on the podcast before, but every time I think about it, I get angry that the names of the months don't line up with what the months are. Like October, why is that not the 8th month? It's right there and so easy to fix, and they just did it wrong. September, 7th month. Come on.
I know.
December.
I'll put in the episode notes a little explanation for those of you who don't know why that they don't line up. It's a whole thing.
Okay.
It's a whole thing.
All right.
But why they won't fix it, that's just stubbornness.
Yeah, we can just agree.
We've just been doing it that way forever.
Yeah, it's like ducks are magic. We've just been doing it this way for long enough.
Exactly. Yeah. Are there any other bits of the Almanac that you want to mention? It is just a fun bit of nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah, it is and it's just crammed full of stuff, and it's great. But I do enjoy Stanley advertising his almost complete pin collection, because he's now at the post office.
He's moved on.
Yeah.
He's moved on to stamps. He doesn't need it anymore.
But almost.
I just like the idea that it's almost complete.
Yeah.
Like he's got nearly one of every kind of pin that has ever existed.
Have you seen that episode of The Simpsons where a bird club is meeting up? Jasper, the old man, looks out the window and he goes, "My God, a pigeon. That's the last bird in my book." He writes something in a notebook and then leaves.
That's great.
Yeah.
I can imagine Stanley doing something else where he's just like, a safety pin. That's the last one I didn't have.
Yeah.
But of course, it would be a very specific make and model of safety pin. It wouldn't just be a safety pin.
Yeah.
So.
The T35 latching, like, yeah.
Yeah, with the triple spring. Yeah, amazing.
My God, a pigeon. It's just so stupid. So good.
That is very stupid. What a good gag. Well, look, that kind of brings us to the Ankh-Morpork Archives Volume 2, which is, look, I feel like, the first one, it's very definitely Ankh-Morpork. I feel this one, they're stretching the name a little bit. It's got the City Watch, which is great, and then it's got the Fool's Guild, also great, institution of Ankh-Morpork, but then it's got the League of Temperance and Vampires, and then Lucy's Book of Enlightenment. I don't know how I feel about those last two. But anyway, we'll go through them in order.
But let me just say how I feel about that.
Oh, sorry.
Because I didn't have the diary. So this is my first experience of these texts. So the first one, I'm like, oh yeah, here's the guilds. That all sort of matches up. This one, it's like, you see your friend over there. Like, you can just see the top half of them and you wave. And then suddenly it turns out they're in a tank and they're a mermaid. So like, it just gets weirder all the way down. So...
That's a great way to describe it.
So City Watch,
yeah.
Yep, that's what we expected. Fool's Guild, oh yeah, sure. And then Reformed Vampires, is that? They kind of got individual guy, sure. And now here's a bunch of pictures. Sure. And I'm not complaining about it. Like, having all this in one book is great, but the part of me that has catalogued all of my books in a database doesn't love this.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. The City Watch is first up, though, and this is... the Ankh-Morpork City Watch Diary, 1999 is the original one. And this was published between The Last Continent and Carpe Jugulum. So in terms of watch books, it comes between Jingo and The Fifth Elephant. So it's a little bit earlier than some of the ones we've already talked about. But it's interesting that it has some quite specific information about the watch at that time. But it also includes some things that are a little bit weird to have been printed in a handbook. Like there's some memos and communications between specific staff members. And you're like, I don't think this would really go in there, but that's fine. It's like, it's in there for a gag. It doesn't really matter. But there's also some reference to the books in here. Like, so in most of these guild-based ones, Lord Vetinari writes an introduction. And here he talks about some of the things that the watch has achieved, including like solving the mystery of the opera ghost, retrieving a book that was stolen from Unseen University. Doesn't mention the dragon though.
No.
And he mentions, that they deal with crimes that were committed without guild approval. So he's sort of reinforcing the point of them existing even despite the other arrangements that he's made around the city. And again, we've got a message from the leader of not the guild, but, the watch.
But do we?
Not written.
Yeah, okay.
Well, no,
yeah, there
exactly.
we go.
Because he's asked Carrot to write it, but then been very emphatic that Cheery must do the punctuation, which is a nice sort of callback to Carrot's letters home from the novels.
But it does feel in character that is how it would go down.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Vimes is too busy. He's not going to write that kind of nonsense.
Yeah.
And then, it's got a lot of stuff. It's like, it makes sense as information for new recruits. It's like, here's what the role of the watch is, which is a speech given by Vimes. I thought this was interesting because the footnote says it's a speech given on the opening of the Ankh-Morpork City Watch Officer Training School. But also, in his speech, he mentions that there's not even 60 of them in the watch. I'm like, how many officers are you training in this school? Like, it can't be that many. But, I guess when you've got Sybil Ramkin money, you can have as small a school as you want and pay for it. So the watch is still pretty small. But it's got some nice gags in it. There's a bit about how, you might be doing all kinds of things as a member of the watch. Like you might even help deliver a baby. Sometimes that means you get one named after you. And then there's a gag about how Nobby's got like a record of like 4 or 5 this year. I've got to have a word to him about that.
I like the thread about Nobby requesting to go to his grandmother's funeral, like, too much. Like, it's like a thread throughout the whole section, which is quite good, including in the memos.
Yeah, that was fun.
Oh, yeah, and the pigeon testing was very good, because it's like, and because, like, your pigeons, like, come back and it's not... it's neat. I like it.
Yeah, the little codes for the pigeon messages. Yeah. Because they haven't yet adopted the clacks fully, the watch at this stage. I thought that was fun.
Yeah.
There's some stuff. I think this was one that Stephen Briggs mentioned in his introduction, is that one of the challenges in this was that, I think it's in Guards, the motto on the wall says Fabricati Diem Punk, which is, obviously meant to mean make my day. But bits of the motto have fallen off. It's like the post office motto. He was like, well, what was the original one? Like, if that's what's left And so for this book, he goes and he works out what the original motto would have been in Latation, the fake dog Latin language of the ancient Discworld. That was pretty fun. That was great. There's a lot of stuff in here that's also riffing on sort of the idea of modern policing in the UK around the time that it was written. So there's like this idea that they've got a new badge design, and this is going to be part of a new, and this is the term the book uses, corporate identity for the watch. And they're going to introduce a new motto, but Vimes is not a fan. And so there's all this stuff happening indicating that not just Vimes is trying to change the watch into something better, but that there's also this pressure from the bureaucracy of the city to change the watch that he's resisting. So there's an interesting kind of tension there that doesn't come across in the books as much, except in maybe some of the ones where the watch is not the main characters, like in, say, The Truth. I think there's a bit of that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting bits and pieces in here in between that as well. So I quite liked the complaint section.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's just like a short story, or like a vignette about.
Yeah.
He said, she
that
said.
was fun.
Yeah. But yeah, it was good.
That reminds me, in that introduction that Carrot wrote for Vimes, he mentions that the complaints against the watch have increased 20%, the best year yet. And I'm not sure if it means it's the best in that they've got more complaints than ever before, or if like the increase in complaints has gone down. I couldn't quite wrap my head around what that gag was meant to be, but it was still funny with a side order of disturbing. Why are you getting more complaints? The watch.
I read that as because it's like semi-early watch-ish, and getting more complaints means they're actually doing more stuff. So it is like pretty good. So like if you're making the public, they're showing they're having an impact. So people were previously allowed to go about their crimes unbothered, and now people are complaining that the watch are around. So it's good for the watch and society, I guess. That's how I read it anyway.
No, that makes sense. There's some great illustrations in this one as well. I really love the gargoyle officer on page 33.
Yeah.
Just great.
That's probably why there's an A and an E in the messaging. Are you getting my pigeons? Like, are they arriving?
Yeah. Or they're getting eaten.
Yeah. Well, they're arriving, but they're not coming back.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, there's lots of great stuff in this. Did you have any other favorite bits?
Too many to mention. I did enjoy the illustrations, and again, we could go through all of them and sort of say, did they match up with what you imagined? Did they not? But I mean, Dibbler looks a bit too like wholesome, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But he has looked somewhat wholesome for people to buy the things from him. So, How about you?
Look, there were lots. Any illustration of Buggy Swires is quite fun with his wearing his shield on his back.
Proportionate as well, like this.
Yeah, and he's tiny. He's tiny. And just any of the gargoyles I really enjoy. And the trolls, they're pretty great. I thought it was a little bit odd. It's a very nice illustration of Angua, both as a person and as a wolf. But it's not keeping it a secret that she's a wolf. Yeah. Whereas in the later books, it's very much still nobody knows who the werewolf in the watch is, and they all think it's Nobby.
Is this just for the watch, though? Like, is it like supposed to be like super? I mean, it'd get out, but like, it
would get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a good point.
But that's fine. Those little things are not really that important. But there's lots of nice little touches in there.
Yeah, they've got the same expression. It's nice.
I did like you talked about the complaint example. I also quite like the police report example where there's one written by Carrot and one written by Nobby, and one is like an example of what to do and one is an example of what not to do. And they are exactly the opposite of what you would think.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. I did enjoy that.
Yeah, I think it was. I kicked him in the fork.
I'm sure you appreciate this too. There's in the history section, there's a picture of Mad King Ludwig of Ankh-Morpork.
Or the tree.
Clearly named after the real Mad King Ludwig, famously of the board game. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Disney castle.
So look, that's the watch. The Fool's Guild one. Now, if you're one of those people who's creeped out by clowns, don't read this. Skip this one. There's a lot of creepy clowns in this. And in fact, Paul Kidby says in his introduction, I wasn't creeped out by clowns when I started drawing this, but by the end, I did not feel great. And he apologizes for one character in particular. He's like, maybe that was a bit far. And again, this is one where Stephen Briggs had a lot of fun doing research. And in fact, shout out to Stephen Briggs. I don't know if you're listening to this episode, but he commented on our original Facebook post about this when we said we were going to do it, and said that they had a lot of fun making them. And I think we can really tell. Like, you can really feel someone was like, oh yeah, what can we do? What bits of Discworld can we like poke and see how they work?
No,
just...
I know I said it looks like like the structure, but like the joy of all of these comes through in everything, like in the illustrations and the little jokes, even in some like little headings. It's a joyful read.
Yeah. I just love I think in the Fool's Guild, I love the names of all the things, like the Bouncy Normo Library. Like that just tells a whole story all by itself. And the picture of the Fool's Guild building, which has like, you know, a big red nose and clown smile painted on the front, and there's like a circus tent sort of in the middle of it,
and the mysterious history of it. Like, was it a plague house?
Oh yeah, they don't know what it was originally for. Just great stuff.
Oof.
It's interesting that, you know, some of the guilds there's a bit of overlap in the story. You know, there's that sort of, this is a terrible school to be at with the Assassin's Guild, and there's a bit of that with the Fool's Guild as well. But it's just a different kind of terrible. Like, you might die, but also you're just going to have a miserable time. But I like the way that they sort of talk about all the different kinds of foolery and clowning that they do. And it's still mostly old school, traditional clowning and being a jester. From memory, I was trying to find it when we were preparing this episode. I feel like I remembered there was sort of like a new branch of comedy that was sort of opening up, which was kind of the Ankh-Morpork equivalent of stand-up comedy. But it was kind of frowned upon by the school, but I couldn't find the reference to it. I'm sure it's in here somewhere, but I couldn't find it again, so I might have been imagining that. Because they talk about jesters and mimes and all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, but again, great picture of the faculty. Oh my God.
Oh, and I just love...
Horrifying.
I also like love that it's kind of like a monk's life originally, like, because they go through like how it used to be worse, like it's like singing about your half a pint, but it's the schedule of an original Fool's Day was quite horrifying. This faculty picture, I think, will haunt my nightmares for a while.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. Because they're creepy. I don't know. Have you ever seen the film Killer Clowns from Outer Space?
I have not, and it sounds like one I should avoid. But no,
look, it's a very silly comedy. It's not even really a horror film, but it's sort of a vaguely comedy horror film from the 80s. And it sort of posits that there's these aliens who come down, they eat people, and they sort of have these guns that coat you in cotton candy, and then they take the cotton candy back to their spaceship, which looks like a circus tent, and then they drink your blood out of the cotton candy.
It's a fun 80s movie, you know.
Yeah, well, look, it was pretty low budget. Like the guys who made it, there's a couple of brothers, and I don't think that they'd really done anything else at the time. And it kind of became a bit of a cult classic because the clown designs are kind of amazing. But the other thing that the storyline they have is that the reason people find clowns creepy is this sort of ancestral memory of the killer clowns from outer space coming to Earth periodically. And some of that memory has been perverted and turned into actual people pretending to be clowns. But it means when they turn up, people don't really realize what they are. But they're kind of these bigger than life monstrous clowns with like big pointy teeth and weird weapons and things. And it's very silly. But this reminded me a bit of that. It had a bit of those vibes.
It's a good premise.
It's one of those movies that you enjoy partly because it's so bad, but also you have to marvel at these people who created it doing it on a oily rag. And it's had a bit of a resurgence. It's become a bit of a cult classic, as I said. And there's actually a video game that came out last year or is coming out this year, I forget, based on it. So it's sort of having a bit of a moment. But yeah, this has got everything. It's a bit about what do you wear. There's some great references to the mimes. The fact that we do teach miming still, but you cannot do it outside of the campus or you'll be in big trouble.
Yeah, and if they try and recruit you, do not accept.
Do not. Well, that was one thing in the Almanac I didn't mention, but there's one bit where in the astrology section where they just go through what all the star signs are, and it's quite long. There's a lot of them. And some of them sort of fall off because Greater Chewin's swimming through space. Eventually, some of the star signs fade off into the distance and new ones come into view. But there's one where it's got a similar name to another one. And it says, you might confuse this with the bigger goat or whatever the other name is. And then just in bold letters, it just says, don't. And I was like, that's great. That tickled me. You just reminded me of that for a second. Yeah. Do you have any other favourite bits here?
The exam. And I think we should do that at some point. Like
the exam.
Yeah.
That could be great. I feel like as someone who professionally teaches comedy, I was reading these questions and going, oh, I see what you've done there. So yeah, I thought that was fun. But again, it's very old school, traditional clown. It's kind of music hall kind of jokes, I think, is kind of the way that it's pitched.
Yeah, but you have to know the classics to be able to come up with your own things. It's like how you have to know how to paint, to break things like Picasso, et cetera, et cetera. So you got to know the music hall jokes before you can.
But it's still intimated in here that, there's the approved jokes and they're the ones you're allowed to tell. And then you're not really allowed to tell other jokes, which I think goes all the way back to Weird Sisters with Verence the Fool. I think that's sort of how he had to behave. But there's some great stuff in here.
Yeah. Oh, the exam for fools and minstrels only. It's very good. I'll read it. You have to write and perform within 15 minutes a ballad for your lord on the bounteous joys of his mistress. At some point, the examiners will signal that his wife has entered the room. Marks will be given for the skill with which the subsequent wording is changed on the fly in view of the wide physical differences between the two ladies. Like, that contains multitudes. That's like one paragraph, really short, but it's just brilliant.
Oh, yeah. That was great. I loved that. And the little illustrations that accompany those exam questions are so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's one about being a clown at a children's party and they're not showing you respect. What do you do about it? There's this one. Which of these animals is it impossible to make with the guild #1 squeaky balloon animal kit? And then at the bottom it says, this may be a trick question.
Oh.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah. Like we were saying earlier, you can tell that they enjoyed this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The great moments in mirth section.
Oh, my God.
A lot of fun. And it finishes with some mimes being strung upside down, as Lord Veterinary always threatens to do. But then there's only a couple left. And this is where we leave the guilds behind and go into sort of other realms. And the first thing is kind of like a guild, like it is an organization. Yeah. We've got the League of Temperance for vampires. Not only do they get to talk, and again, this is from the introduction, but they talk about how this was fun because they got to do vampires, but also they got to sort of make fun of old school temperance leagues and all the kind of things that they would do to stop themselves having fun, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very simplistic way to talk about a temperance league, of course. It's a very necessary thing for many people, but also, like any old institution, there are weird kind of traditions that go along with it. But I think one of the things reading this is that I still don't really understand how vampires are supposed to work on the Discworld. Like, it seems like they were not once regular human beings. Yes, you can be turned into a vampire by a vampire, but vampires are also like a separate species of person because they seem to have their own culture, their own society, and they don't really understand how, quote unquote, humans work, which is funny, but it also, I don't know, there's something about it that it just feels weird, like it's not part of the vampire myth that they're sending up.
Yeah, because there are definitely the characters who've been turned into vampires. I hadn't really thought about it like that. I had just assumed that the ones who were so into vampire culture had just been vampires for such a long time they couldn't remember their human lives. Because if you've been alive for 500 years and you were turned into a vampire at 16, you probably would forget what it's like to be a human.
That's a fair call.
I hadn't probed into it, but I had just assumed that they'd been around for a long time and the percentage of their life was mostly vampire. But now that you say it, it does feel like they've always been, you can't be like a baby vampire growing up into an adult vampire.
Well, I mean, I think we talked about this in Carpe Jugulum because remember, the magpies are like a family of vampires. And so I think it's a little uncertain. It's one of those things where they kind of want to do it both ways because then they get the most gags out of it and don't think about it too much. I guess is probably the right answer.
But as someone who has spent time, because I watched a lot of Buffy, all of that stuff, I was like, how does the sucking of blood work? We probably talked about this at the time as well. It's the most efficient way would be to have hollow fangs where there's a hole at the bottom of each fang. You can pierce in with it and use them like straws. It's hollow at the bottom and hollow at the back, and then you can just suck the blood through it like that. But probably the actual way is they just make a hole with their teeth and they suck it out.
Yeah. And there's a lot of interesting sort of weird stuff that you can get into, and so many different sources of vampire fiction have lots of stuff about that. And this isn't really that, because this is all about the weirdness of being a vampire and trying not to be a vampire.
Yeah.
which is funny, and it is fun.
Oh, the illustrations.
The illustrations are great because they're sort of old school vampires, but being weird.
And the tension in them, like you can just, they're trying so hard. Like there's the sweat on the brow and the awkward smiles and yeah.
Oh, yeah. And the weird fake teeth that some of them are wearing. Just great stuff. Yeah.
Your new name is a good bit.
That's great. Yeah, that one vampire is called Bob.
Yep.
Who's the only one who's managed to master the art of just having one name. Very silly. Very silly. Oh, they talk about the Really Human Front, which is like this other vampire organization who take it too far and try to pretend to be like not just not drink people's blood, but like really go way too far in pretending to be human beings. Like just this sort of layers of rivalry and different sort of perspectives. Just a lot of fun.
All right, and what job are you choosing if you're in the Vampire Temperance League?
Oh, look, I mean, I like that the lists are very specific, like jobs you can do in full evening dress and jobs you could do in an underwire daphne. I don't know. I mean, I was looking at that. I was like, I could do some of these other possible jobs. And then they've got the list of like jobs to be avoided, which are all the jobs that vampire has in that one book where he keeps turning up at the watch house complaining. I think musician or conductor or theatre manager, like I feel like I'd have to lean into my strengths.
Yeah.
Liz.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I can theatre manager, but I mean, croupier just has a sort of, I reckon that'd be interesting for a brief period of time. You'd see a lot of interesting stuff.
I wonder what you'd be in trouble though if you're the sort of vampire who has to stop and count things though, wouldn't you?
True. I think theatre manager is the one to go with. Like but that's just both of us leaning into our existing interests, which is what the question is. So great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also, this is kind of like a handbook for vampires who just sort of starting out, like, how do I stop being a vampire? There's a lot of good tips in here. I do think that the vampires who've got the fake teeth look a lot like, they're this sort of weird mashup. They almost look like, we were talking about The Simpsons before. They're kind of like a Simpsons character crossed with a Paul Kidby illustration.
True. Ooh. Does that mean that The Simpsons are vampires?
Or ex-vampires. I don't know, maybe. Maybe they are. It would explain a few things, probably. It would explain why they don't seem to age, for one thing. Yeah. And we have a great group illustration here of all of the officers of the League as well. I like how it covers a lot of different kinds of vampire. And Paul Kidby's Igors are not how I imagined Igor to look, I think, but...
No, but I respect it.
But I do like them. They're great. They're kind of very cute, I think. Did you have any other favourite bits from this?
No, I think I brought up my main ones. Like, it's just the illustrations, though. I just love how, like, everyone's just, like, dying for a sip of blood and, like, chewing on plates and just real tense.
Yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. But also just, so many great, fun vampire illustrations.
And references, especially in the wake of Nosferatu. So, like, the infamous vampires, Graf Orlok Magarato. How about you?
I think we've covered most of them. I did really enjoy this. I think as someone who's enjoyed a lot of sort of more modern vampire fiction as well, there's some stuff that I kind of wish was in there, but I understand that they're really leaning into the sort of more old school vampire tropes, which is fun. It's still a lot of fun. I got no problem with that.
The reveal that Bob, not a vampire?
Yeah.
But they want to keep him because he's like such a good example to the others on how to like resist being a vampire.
That was very funny.
Yeah.
Look, that brings us to the last one, which is Lutzi's Book of Enlightenment. It's kind of, I mean, one of these things is not like the others. It's not really an organization. This is more a book of wisdom and advice from a favorite character, from the sweeper of the monks of history. And there's a lot in here which is kind of recapping who he is and talking about who the history monks are. And there's pictures of various monks, including a few new ones who haven't been mentioned before. There's a section devoted to the way of Mrs. Cosmopolite. And a lot of it is stuff that, I mean, because, you know, it's interesting because Lucy is in a couple of books. He's in like 3 books, really.
Yeah.
I think he turns up briefly in a couple of others, but he's really in 3 books. And so he is a character who is a bit bigger than most supporting characters, but is he and the gags about him, do you feel like is there a weird choice for one of these diaries, do you think, or does it kind of work?
it's not a weird choice for one of the diaries, because as separate things, I can see this like as something that shoots off from it, but as an inclusion in this book, it's a bit of a tonal shift. So I can absolutely see it as its own thing. You're like, oh yeah, it's like we're going for advice rather than gags, but it's still sort of thematically, like you can see it being included in this collection. I'm not saying it shouldn't be in here. It's good, but it's just so different from the other bits.
Yeah.
By the other three, I wasn't quite in the mood for it, if that made sense. I was like, no, I want to keep just having the silly jokes. And there's still silly jokes, of course, but yeah. And also, it makes you ask why this character. Like, I feel like death would have been a good one, but it's a bad vibe for a diary to be like, here's the death-themed diary.
Yeah, and he wouldn't really write something for people either, so it's a bit, yeah. Could have been Susan could have written something, maybe.
Absolutely,
Susan's maybe a book for young ladies, you know.
I think that could have been quite a fun one, but I think the idea of having sort of like, because you do get diaries that are like, here's some wisdom, here's some advice, here's how to get through the week, here, like that kind of thing. So it kind of feels like it's riffing on those kind of diaries, which makes sense while also sticking with Discworld. So it makes sense and it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah, that's fair. There are some great puns and silly things in here.
Yeah.
Like I like the bit about the diet. So it's
the macro.
It's called the mega biotic diet. My favorite rule of which is there's no upper limit to the amount of tea and biscuits that may be consumed, which certainly matches my experience of hanging out with older ladies. And indeed my own experience. I eat way too many biscuits and drink too much tea, but yeah, pretty great. There's also some stuff that is, I think they crawl up to the edge of being inappropriate, but they are kind of in some ways making fun of the Western co-option of foreign ideas. You know what I mean? Like the way that they make fun of meditation in this book is not really making fun of what real meditation practices are like. It's more making fun of what that guy in a scout hall who has never been outside of Swansea or whatever is teaching you to do as a meditation.
Yeah.
You know, that's the vibe I got, but I also felt, I don't know, I sometimes felt a little uncomfortable reading this. I was like, oh, I feel like you've managed to avoid going over a line here, but maybe you sidle up pretty close to the line a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fair comment.
But it's still quite fun.
Yeah.
And there's a whole section which is just, here's some things that Mrs. Cosmopolite has said. And, you know, I tried to collect a lot of them when we were reading Thief of Time, but this is like a big collection of, I think it's got most of the ones that appear in that book and then a whole bunch of other things, which I quite liked. Yeah.
Yeah. Good to have them all here.
Yeah. And I think that the really fun part of that for me is that it's got what Mrs. Cosmopolite says, and then it's like what the Seeker of Wisdom should say in response, which kind of shows what kind of cosmic meaning they're gleaning from all of these sort of like traditional bits of nonsense wisdom that are not really wisdom at all. They're just sort of things that people say. Yeah.
I'm presuming that this acolyte is a reformed vampire, because that's one of the acceptable jobs you can have.
An acolyte.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did enjoy the bit about Mrs. Golightly, the ruler of darkness. How her neighbor is just like the devil.
Yeah. Because that is exactly like that tracks.
And there's a fun bit towards the end where there's like, here's all of the different kinds of monks, because Pratchett has like named quite a few. The monks of Cool were pretty fun. I really enjoyed seeing an illustration of them, and
they are very cool.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
They are very cool. Yeah. And there's the monks of Cool Real and the monks of Cool Ordinary. Who are just always not quite.
Yeah.
They're always trying to catch up to what the actual coolness is. Which reminded me, there's a Tripod song. I always get into stuff just as it's finishing being cool is the first line of it. It's pretty
Ordinary monk
kind
areas.
of the same vibe. Yeah. But yeah, it's got all the other monks that we've mentioned, and including the Way of Lobsang Dibbler. Got to get a Lobsang in there, of course. Which is, as mentioned in one of the books, is clearly like a front for a certain entrepreneur pretending to have ancient wisdom.
And I like that one of the monks of Cool is surfing on a Hokusai wave.
That's right. I'd forgotten about that.
Because that would be cool. Yeah.
That would be cool. That would be very cool.
Yeah.
I think, actually, you know what? One of my favorite illustrations in this is the Dragon of Unhappiness, which is just based on a quote from The Truth, where someone They reproduce the quote here. That advice had cost him $2, along with an injunction to keep the lid on the privy down so that the dragon of unhappiness wouldn't fly up his bottom, which is kind of a mixture of health advice and feng shui. But the dragon in question is drawn standing on a toilet. That's very funny.
Yeah, but like, is it the dragon of unhappiness because it lives in the toilet or vice versa?
And then in the back of this one, there's some extra illustrations of things that didn't make it into the book, sketches, other alternative designs. There's a great one of someone turning into an Igor, which parodies the Descent of Man, which I quite liked.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's the Ankh-Morpork archives. The gags are fun. If there's any of these things that are covered in any of those diaries are like one of your favorite bits of Discworld, you will have so much fun delving into it and looking at them. It's just great.
Yeah.
It's just great.
Like, I know I'm going to go back into the Assassin's Guild one because you can't take it all in the first time or even the second time.
No, and they're not really designed for that, This is like, here's a bunch of fun stuff. Delve in whenever you want. But speaking of delving, we did get some questions that we should delve into. So do you want to kick us off with some of these questions, Liz?
Yes, so our first question comes from Robin Wolf via Blue Sky, who says, I would like to know whether the paper the Almanak is printed on is suitable for its standard use. Please rate its absorbency and comfort. All right, I'm going to get out the copy and give these pages a feel.
Yeah. They are. It's quite different paper. I think they've deliberately printed it on something that feels a bit more like, it's not
this would hurt
newsprint,
you,
but it's got that sort of old school feel. Yeah, I don't think you would want to use it for that. I don't really know how absorbent it would be.
I feel like it would be absorbent, but you wouldn't find out because it would be too painful. Like, it's too thick. Like, it's just
And the edges are quite sharp.
Yes,
I feel.
Yeah, so
I'd be a bit worried.
You'd be better off reading some advice from the book than using the book for that. Like,
I mean, maybe we're speaking from like round world privilege there, where we have very nice paper for this purpose.
What you would do, like, if let's get right into the weeds of this, is you you tear one out and you'd scrunkle it up a bunch. Like, you have to just like scrunch it into a ball, unscrunch it, scrunch it into a ball, unscrunch it, and you'd
soften it
exactly, and then it would be usable
while you're sitting there.
Yeah,
give you something to do as well.
Yeah, and tear off the sharp edges, like each side, you tear that off, and then it'll be usable. But you wouldn't want to do this because it's funny and it's good.
Yeah. It wouldn't last very long, though. It doesn't have that many pages.
No. So it depends on what you'd eaten beforehand.
Yeah. I feel like the coming of newspaper to the disc has been a real boon to the country people of the Discworld.
Word.
Yeah.
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 The word, sir. All right. And a second question from Robin is, also, you're approaching the end. Do you know when your last episode will be, and will you do another podcast together? Thanks for all the fish.
Oh, thanks, Robin. Yeah. Look, we don't like to think about this too much, but we do have to think about it because we do have to plan for the end. We haven't quite decided the answer to this, I think is the real answer. We don't have many books left. We've only got 3 Discworld novels, and I think 2 other novels is all we got left. Maybe it's only 1 other novel, but it's not many novels, and there's a few other little things here and there that we're going to do. So, look, it's probably
soon, but...
It's probably soonish, but whether or not what we do afterwards, or when exactly that'll happen, we're in the planning stages of figuring that out.
And we'll let you know.
Yeah, we will let you know. Subscribers will find out first, and then we'll publicly announce what we're going to do once we figure it out. But we are, it's on our minds as well, and we are thinking about it and figuring it out for sure.
All right. So our next questions come from Molokov via Discord. What is your new favorite fact? That's in scare quotes, learn from the archive/almanac that isn't part of the canon of the novels. Any characters mentioned in these spin-offs that you wish could have had a larger part in the books?
Oh, and Molokov is a great example of John, not a vampire at all, Smith, who appears in the Vampire's Diary first, and then later on shows up very briefly in Thud. Look, there's a lot of good ones. I mean, I think we've talked before how we'd love to go back to the Assassin's Guild.
I was going to say that. So yeah, I mean, it gave insight into it that we're never going to get. Again, it's like we're not going to get a book about it, so there's a level of detail in there. And again, like I was saying with the rules, there's little stories within like the rules within the different sections. Like you pick up little bits here and there. So that's not really a new fact per se, but like it's new insight into. Well, there's facts in there too. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I liked some of the sort of things that were sort of filling in gaps. Like there's a bit about the new motto that's proposed for the watch, and there's what the original one was before it became. Like I thought that was quite good. That was a nice bit of information that came in. So that the original motto of the watch was "Fabricati diem puncti agunt celerator," which means make the day, the moments pass quickly. And it was actually originally part of the coat of arms of the Veltric family, who kind of started what became the watch. And then there was meant to be a new, more modern motto, which Vimes did not like, which is innocentes non temibunt quodquam. I don't really know how to pronounce Latin, but it's not really Latin anyway. So
no one knows how to pronounce Latin. Isn't that the whole thing?
Well, I think that we've got a pretty good idea. Yeah, but they've got some ways.
They've got ideas, but they don't know for sure. So your way could be it.
Well, that's true. There's a traditional way to do it. Whether or not that's the original, who knows? But I'm going to have to research this for the episode notes now. I don't know the answer to any of those questions. But anyway, that roughly translates that new motto as "the innocent have nothing to fear." This has, however, been vetoed by Commander Vimes on the basis that the innocent have a great deal to fear, partly from the guilty, but also from the kind of people who come up with slogans like "the innocent have nothing to fear," which I thought was a great little bit of commentary. But there's also that sort of whole, like I was saying before, there's this whole angle that doesn't really come out in the books too much of what the bureaucracy is trying to do to the watch that is different to what Vimes is trying to do to the watch. So I think that's an interesting part. That's an interesting angle that I quite enjoyed. I think that's probably my favorite.
For the second question, any characters that I wish could have had a larger part in books? I absolutely wish that the mole shouter, the mole screamer, had a bigger part in one of the books, or maybe even his own book, like a short one, but like that might be quite a good time.
That could have been fun.
Not for moles, but
yeah. I do also like, and this is what Molokov said this, Alice Band as a character and what she's kind of up to as one of the things. And she does appear briefly in one of the books, but not quite in the same way. Yeah. And he also mentioned Wilf, the god from the Almanac, who's so weird. I don't know, you couldn't really base a whole novel on him, but I think you could have him show up and be weird.
Yeah.
You could do a novel that had something to do with astrology, I think. Like that could be a part of it. Because it has, astrology's featured a couple of times in the stories, and you could do a story that's about something weird happening with astrology, and he would have to show up in that, I think. So that's a possibility.
Ooh, Magrat starts writing horoscopes for the Ankh-Morpork newspaper, and they all start coming true.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah, I feel like that's maybe the one. I don't know.
I feel like there's maybe also something you could do. You could do a story based around the Thieves Guild. I feel like there's, it's always been as a gag, like that it's sort of this institutionalized crime, but you could delve into that a bit deeper. I think you could do something with it. Like, what happens if you have corruption inside a Thieves Guild? Like, what does that look like? How does that work?
It's like, who will guard the guards?
Yeah. Who will thieve the thieves? What? I don't know. There's something there. I think that could have been a thing. And there's a lot of. They're not my favorite characters though. I really like the faculty of the Thieves Guild and the Fools Guild as well. I don't know that you'd write a whole book about the Fools Guild. We kind of got as close to that as we were going to get in Men at Arms, I think, and then they show up again later on. But yeah. So I don't know. I don't know that I've given a very good answer to that. There's a lot of fun stuff in there. But I don't know that there's any that I particularly wish had a bigger part. I think I'm kind of sad that the Unseen University one doesn't have more new characters in it. I would have liked to have seen a bit more of that, but they're all characters that we know from the books. And I guess that's because Unseen University is pretty well explored. But I would have liked to see something more about the students, like what student life is like. There's hints of it in there. You see a little bit of it in moving pictures, but it's clearly changed, and I kind of want to know what's it like to be an actual student at Unseen University. So I guess that would be my answer. I would love to see that as a story and some characters come in there.
All right. Our next question comes from Jeff Clark via Twitter. You each get to design a Pratchett t-shirt. What goes on it? Well, I've got one. So it says Pratchett, not Pratchett. So it's based off what we've just been reading. So it would be Vampire Temperance Sucks with one of the illustrations on there of like a real, like maybe the one where he's chewing a plate.
That's good. That's good.
Otherwise, maybe like one of Miss, like, and I'm just like, wow, what if it was like one of the last 5 things we just discussed before going to the questions? But like one of Miss Polite's quotes would also do quite well on there as well.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I kind of think I would like a stripy shirt that looks like one a mime would wear, but then it has written on it in one of the stripes, not a mime. Or it's got printed on it like a sign tacked on your back that says "Learn the words."
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah,
I like that.
All right. I would buy one of those. I'd buy 2 of those. Actually, I'm not going to have to choose between our t-shirts.
Yeah, I'd buy both. They're good. They're both good.
All right, and I was about to say final. Our final question comes from Sven via Discord. Since we see some insights in different organisations and schools, which of them would you like to see for a YA book series? So, like the famous Wizardry School book that shall not be named, and how would you name a book in your series? For example, Jim and the Poison Peppermint Drops, Assassin Guild, Little Buffo and the Riddle of the Laughing Egg, Clown School, Queen, the Seventh Dong, Monks, etc. That's a great... Did you just come up with those, like, in the moment while writing the question? Because that's amazing.
Sven, those are amazing.
Yeah.
Little Buffo and the Riddle of the Laughing Egg. Oh my God. Yes. Do that.
How can we beat that? Like, those are just 3 examples that have just...
They're so good.
It's not about
beating
it. So
I mean, I just said it. I do feel like I would have loved to have seen a story more about being a student wizard and learning to be a wizard. Like, what is that like? Because we get little hints of what it's like from the faculty, but also what is it like to be a student at that university where the faculty do not want to teach you and they spend all their time having weird adventures? What are the students getting up to? That's one I think I would do that. And I know it's very traditional, like it's a wizard school, but I think it would just be so different as well, because it would be mired in all of these weird ideas about what being at a university would be like. And if you were writing it now, it would be a parody of the modern university experience, which is quite different.
So I would love to just read a whole series of Assassin Guild books, and also Fools. Like, I would actually like a Students of the Fools Guild one as well, because they'd just be so creepy. Like, just the scare, like it would be like a horror series. But I think what I think would be a fun YA series is the Thieves Guild, but in the style of Enid Blyton sort of boarding school novels, like the Naughtiest Girl books. So for those who aren't familiar with it, it's a series where there's a girl who comes from a very wealthy family, very unusual for Enid Blyton boarding school books, who does not want to go to boarding school. So she makes the decision to become the naughtiest girl at school so that she gets kicked out and can go home to all of her pets and her horses and all of that stuff. But over the series of the books, she suddenly realizes that the school is great and she loves it, and that they become like the naughtiest girl again. The naughtiest girl is a monitor. She eventually becomes a model student. It's the whole thing. But I'd love to see that in the Thieves Guild, where to be the naughtiest kid at the Thieves Guild, you have to be like not stealing things. Like, you're like returning stuff on exercises. Like, you're just like rebelling by just being like what would traditionally be considered good, while everyone else being good is like, let's be really good at pickpocketing and that kind of thing when they go out into the streets to practice, that kind of thing. I reckon that'd be quite funny.
You know, I've just realized I think what I would want to see is a book about kids at the other guilds, like the lesser known ones, because there's so many guilds in Ankh-Morpork, like, and we've touched on a few, like there's the Clockmakers Guild and there's the Candle Makers Guild and there's all these other guilds, right? And I feel like you could have a book series which was about kids who are left on the doorstep of these things, and a few of them get together and form a little gang and have adventures. And it would be a way of exploring those other guilds and also dealing with the problems that the big guilds think are beneath them. And you could name each one, because, you know, you also asked about the names, Sven. You could name each one after something themed around the guild that it's particularly revolving around. So if you had like a Clockmakers Guild, it could be like TikTok or something. I don't know. That's a terrible name. You come up with something less cliche, but you know what I mean? Like, that could be really fun. And you could, throw in ones that you haven't really seen much before. Yeah.
For the names of mine, I mean, each one in the series would be like a pun around like stealing hearts, or like just around like thieving things. But mine, I think, is a silly suggestion in the style of book that already exists. Ben's is a suggestion that I would be like, I'd read that. So yeah.
I mean, I would also go for the Fool's Guild one, but I think mine would be about, because I couldn't find it in there. I'm sure there's a reference in there. I'll have to look it up for the episode notes. But if there isn't, or even if there is, I would do it about some young students who are inventing stand-up, like modern stand-up comedy in Ankh-Morpork.
Yeah.
And like defying guild law. to their own peril. So they are being naughty, but they're doing something that's quite advanced. And throughout the series of books, they start telling jokes and they start doing that. Each one they invent or discover a new form of comedy, like observational comedy or absurdist sketch comedy or whatever. They'd they'd form a little group. They'd be like the Footlights or the Pythons or something. That's you could have a lot of fun drawing on the history of British comedy for that. I think that could be a lot of fun. Yeah. Oh,
I was trying to come up with a pun for room for improvement, but that's not. We're not getting there.
That's pretty good though. That's pretty good. Look, thanks everyone who's sending questions. This was a bit of a weird one to do, but I feel like there was so much fun stuff in it that we shouldn't leave them out. But we didn't have a guest because it's
3 books.
Not easy to find a guest who'd read them all and had them.
Yeah.
So it's just us. But next month, we're going to be coming back to a much more regular episode because next month I feel like we're knocking off the last of our novels here. We've only got a few left and we're knocking one off. And I shouldn't have said knocking off. That's almost like a pun, isn't it?
You can do a pun in the Terry Pratchett podcast. That's okay. I think people are on board.
But I think that's your job. But it's, it is, we'll be reading Snuff.
Yes.
The last of the City Watch books. And one that I think you were saying earlier, Liz, you don't think you've read before.
Yeah, I thought I had. And then I was like, okay, when we were discussing whether we were going to do this one next, I asked Ben to describe the plot so we could think about if it's the right one for next. And I realized I didn't know anything about it. I think I rolled it into thud in my head because of the monosyllabic title. So I'm going to get to read a new Terry Pratchett book for the first time in a while.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And look, you know what? It is the most Agatha Christie-esque of the Discworld novels, I feel, as well.
So I would remember
from a certain point of view.
If I had read it, I think. So that's very exciting for me.
That is exciting. So that's what we're going to be reading. That's going to be our May episode. The hashtag, if you want to send us questions about that on social media, is Pratchat86. Or, of course, you can email us as usual at chat@pratchatpodcast.com. But look, thank you so much for joining us for this slightly weird and delayed episode. Thank you for your patience as well.
This wilf of an episode.
It's wilf of an episode. Oh my God. Now I'm worried. I'm worried that, there'll be a person born with 3 microphones or something. I don't know.
But it's normal for the area, so no one will pay much attention.
Yeah. But look, thank you so much for listening. Thank you to all of our subscribers and supporters. We appreciate all of you. You make it possible for us to do this. If you would like to support the podcast, you can go to our website, pratchatpodcast.com, and look at the support us page to find out the ways that you can do that. But look, until next time, remember to write it down in your diary. You've been listening to Pratchat, the monthly Terry Pratchett Book Club podcast with Pratchatters Elizabeth Flux and Ben McKenzie. That's me. Pratchat is produced and edited by me on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. Our music is by David Ashton. We're on social media as Pratchat or Pratchat Podcast, and you can listen to past episodes and support the production of new ones via pratchatpodcast.com. Join the conversation for this episode using the hashtag Pratchat84.
Pratchat is brought to you by Splendid Chaps Productions. We make entertainment for your ears, like the Doctor Who podcast Splendid Chaps and time travel comedy series Night Terrace. To find out more, visit splendidchaps.com.